Oh. Cool. So we do have the meeting notes. Let me go ahead and share those real quick. If you don't mind signing into that and then adding any agenda items. Seems like the anonymous jackal is setting that up for us. All right. We could get started with some status updates. Um, I'll kick it off by saying that I've started working on setting up Tecton instance in GKE via Terraform. That's going okay. There's a little bit of wrestling, in the learning curve for Terraform. Specifically, what I'm trying to achieve is set it up in a way where we could have this, instance be set up on GKE, but then also be able to use a lot of the same configuration locally for something like Kind or the built-in Kates in your Docker for desktop. So a little bit of effort going on in there. There are a couple of other things I started looking into regarding the samples repo. There's a couple CI/CD configurations there. The Circle CI isn't working because it doesn't have permissions to write the report TOML using the Pacato builder. I'm going to try with the sample builder, but I feel like last time this was reported, it was an issue with the Linux version that was being used. I don't see how that relates here, so I'm going to investigate a little bit further. So just tinker with that. And then there is also a Tecton sample CI/CD template or task run that I'm going to figure out how to set up so that that's automatically running as well. That's pretty much it for me. Any other status updates?
I've been plugging ahead with the subcommands. At this point, we have the start of config subcommand. There's a build pack as well and builder. I just made another small thing for pack and fig default builder. And I hope to round out 2 more config ones. And I think there's discussion over pack images. I have posted some feedback on that issue. People can feel free to chime in on that. Yeah.
Could you link that discussion about the pack images? Cool. Any other status updates?
Yeah, I guess. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I've just been finishing off some work around adding cache images to let people have some place where they could persist cache equals true layers.
I was just going to get a quick plug-in about the RFC for the Buildpack registry API search. I made some changes. I know some of you made some comments, so thanks first off for all your feedback. I updated it, and feel free to take another look at it if you are interested. So thanks.
Cool. Travis, at this point, do you think most of your focus will be on the distribution/registry side of things versus pack?
Yeah, most likely for sure. Yeah, especially once this RFC gets through.
Cool, cool. All right. Any other status updates before we move on? Cool. Let's go on to release planning. I don't have anything. David, seems like you do.
Yes, I think according to our typical calendar, so CCB is supposed scheduled for next week for a week from today. So that's Wednesday the 16th. And I feel like there's still a bunch of stuff still in play, especially because and with the release to be, I guess, Wednesday the 23rd. So anyways, releasing around holidays is probably not a great idea, just because people are out and we're not necessarily going to test it as much. But also especially because as part of it, we're trying to finish up some subcommands and like make a somewhat dramatic UX change. I kind of want to make sure that it's all packaged and tested a bit better than I feel like it would be. So I would vote for us to defer the release for until after holidays.
So one of the concerns I have is a theme that is recently coming up regarding the Buildpack URIs. I know I haven't technically merged that PR in, but it's supposed to address a lot of those use cases that have been coming up. I wonder if it's worth creating a patch release with just that PR, essentially to further improve that part and hopefully minimize that impact. But I don't know that it's as critical, I guess, because there is, at least right now, a workaround where you add the Docker schema. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, David.
Yeah, I definitely hear you on that. I feel like we haven't seen so much. It'd be one thing if we were getting kind of daily bug reports on it. I think at this point we've gotten two, which is not nothing, but it's not like the public clamoring on our doors.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't like having revision support. So I definitely hear that. I just feel like it could be just doing a patch release with that could end up being a bit more complicated, just rebasing it and etc. But
yeah, I
I'm
definitely
happy to
feel like
discuss
the
it.
effort, it would be more effort now that we've merged a couple, or it's built on top of a whole bunch of other changes, right? Like subcommands and some other PRs that have been put in, like build pack pull and stuff like that. So, so there would be effort there, and then I think this is a riskier change, where I would kind of propose that we have a longer RC period for, and maybe that's a viable option too, is like produce an RC if we are able to before the what is it, the release date that we currently have. And maybe that way, if people are running into certain issues, we could tell them to try the RC build.
It'd be great if we could get the main consumers, I guess, of Pack, that being the Potato Project, Heroku, and Google, to use RC builds to kind of actually test it out. Like this would have been great for if like the Spring Boot had used this and then, found this out while it was still in RC, because they are one of the main consumers. That it's something I'd love to explore in the future. I'll jot down a note.
Yes, as far as I'm aware, the Spring Boot is special because they don't actually use Pack. I don't right
That's
like
true.
they re-implemented it, everything. They use the outcome, which is the builders, and those we have to be a little bit more cautious of changing because of them consuming them directly. Anyways, it sounds like we don't want to push for a patch and release before the holidays, but might be worth still trying to see if it's timely to push out an RC before the holidays. Does that sound appropriate? Cool.
I'll just add that on the life cycle side, we are looking to make like some improvements, I guess, to the release process and the way we circulate release candidates, you know, to potential consumers. So we'll, whatever you learn about good practices there, I think we'd want to try to evaluate those as well.
I see. Cool. Yeah, I definitely feel like they're different types of consumers, right? One of them is end users. The other one is, you know, the providers of build packs and builders. And so the audience is very different. But yeah, anything that we do learn, we'll relay for sure. Cool. Anything else on release planning? All right, moving on to docs issues ownership. Natalie, do you want to speak to this one, or do you want me to?
I'm happy to chime in with, you know, what I know, which is that the learning team, kind of looking at the long list of open issues on the docs repo, is trying to figure out how we can provide like a mechanism by which other sub teams can own certain issues, prioritize, and complete those. And so one idea that we came up with is with labels, so similar to what we're doing with the RFCs, using a label to designate the sub team that would be responsible for those. And then I guess there's like some automation that we can use to designate an owner, so that person can not necessarily do the work, but, you know, monitor and ensure that it is done at some point. I don't know what we think about that.
It would be extremely useful if when I opened an issue, I could assign it to myself. Just so I just don't have that level of permission, right?
Interesting.
You probably get you. Are you a platform contributor yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
You are. Okay, so we should get you to be a
Learning
one.
contributor. Yeah.
I don't know. Did Dan pass the security background check?
No.
Okay, then that's probably why.
We have a couple tiers. He just hasn't gotten to that one quite yet. Overall, he's safe. We're sure of that. Yeah.
He didn't kill me when he played Among Us, you know, like 15 minutes ago. So
You were next.
Javier, on the other hand.
Oh man.
So, I mean, sorry to like really dive into that one though, right? So you're wanting to assign issues to yourself. How does that play into this idea where at least the RFCs right now are random, right? So like we would specify something like platform, and it would randomly pick somebody from the platform team and own them, or make them owners. Are we saying that we want a separate mechanism that would work, or that you want the flexibility to do both?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe there's two different. So there's like maybe two different people that are opening issues, because like I think that the issues I've opened on the docs repo have been like, oh, I've written a feature, I should add documentation for it. That's like really part of the story delivery. And it would be useful for me to be able to just be like, okay, this is on my queue. It's like when this stuff gets accepted and goes through, I should like write docs that are relevant. But if anyone's like missing documentation that they want to see, they don't care about this process at all, right?
Yeah. Okay. So that definitely sounds like you want to be part of the learning contributors so that you have that management of being able to set that. The part I want to make sure we don't overlook is that there's going to be issues created by other contributors, right? And those, I doubt that they themselves would own it, right? And so therefore we want somebody else to own it. So it sounds like we want a little bit of both. We want the automated plus be able to customize it. Cool. And I'm gonna add a note, Dan, for learning contributor. I'll take that on. I'll see what we could do there.
I appreciate it.
Cool. Any other questions on this topic? All right, moving on to experimental features for Pack.
Yeah, that's me. I just had a quick question that came up during a one-on-one I had with Joe this morning. So he might bring it up in working group, but I figure since I'm here, I might as well ask. We were wondering what's the criteria or how, what's the process from going from an experimental feature to an actual feature for Pack? Because for example, right now, as we think ahead with some of the registry work that we've been working on, what should we keep in mind as we look to making those more official features?
So I think, for sure, the registry is a little bit easier to look at, right? Because I think we had a very, almost detailed roadmap for when that would come out of experimental, and that was when we had the Pacato and Heroku, and I guess those would be the only two that I could think of, build packs in the registry, and we would have people consuming them via Pack experimentally, right? So we needed to make sure that that contract wasn't going to change anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it isn't until just very recently that the build packs actually got in the registry, but we don't have any consumption yet, right? So it'd be up to when we have that consumption, where I think we could say, okay, now we've kind of ironed all the kinks out, and we could kind of bring it to non-experimental mode. At least that was the impression I was getting.
Yeah, we're not trying to push it or anything. I think we're just trying to be conscious of what we need to consider as we continue to iterate on it and just make sure that we're all on the same page. So it just sounds like we're moving in that direction, but until it stabilizes a little more and we get more involvement, then we'll kind of get together and decide if it makes sense, when it makes sense to go ahead and move that over. Is that kind of what I'm hearing then?
Yeah.
Okay.
I definitely feel like your RFC is a very useful part of that, just because it's wouldn't be helpful to I mean, fine, we can take it out of experimental, people can ostensibly use it, but the search functionality right now is not super great. So it wouldn't be super value adding for users at the moment. I think maybe it would require a lot more effort, versus if we're oh yeah, there's this thing that's supposed to provide all these very useful build packs that are easily available. So right now they're not so easily available.
But I think you have the inverse too, right? You could look at this where the registry won't be they won't search the registry for build packs to use. I think I've heard this through one of the working group meetings, is that they'll see, hey, Joe just announced that he produced the Minecraft build pack, right? And then he has some sort of snippet that says this is how you use it with Pack, and it's a registry pointer, right? Versus any other sort of pointer. So you could still use the registry without having a search, the search functionality. So I personally don't think that we should pin it coming out of experimental on whether or not we have a search functionality. I think what personally I'm looking forward to is making sure that there's not going to be any additional changes to the way that we've structured the data, because those discussions have come up, as part of this RFC. It's should we add additional metadata every time we consume the image or something like that, right?
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I do see them as two separate things. It does help having a better, more robust search capability to to drive that user experience from Pack. But yeah, I do see them as independent. But yeah, I agree with you too, Javier, that I think there has been some good discussions that'll be nice to iron out a little more and solidify around that have come up in this RFC. So like I said, I'm not in a hurry personally, and I don't think Joe is. We just want to make sure we're following the rules and having open discussion about when it makes sense with everybody who has interest in that. So it's good to know.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and then I'll hammer a couple more thoughts into this experimental feature criteria. Other use case for experimental is when like there's bits and pieces of the feature as a whole available, but not in any way where it's like user friendly yet, right? And that's why registry fell very quickly into experimental, is because we wanted to provide different functionality, right? And then put that functionality in different places, and we weren't able to do it all in one release, right? That'd be another criteria.
Yeah, it definitely helps from an iterative perspective too. Yeah, like you're saying. So cool.
Cool. All right. Any other thoughts, comments, questions on this topic? Okay, moving on to the last item, something about dark mode and sponsors. Who wants to talk about this?
So if you click on the thing, the links, so there's a new GitHub potential, or apparently we had access to it. We had early access to it for a while. You can have a discussions space in the community. This would kind of be a page that lives together with, I guess, either the pack repo, community, etc., where you can have that you can have like a discussion board and people can post questions and get answers, etc. I guess it's supposed to be a bit less friction than forcing people to join Slacks. They don't always love joining another Slack group if they just want to answer to one question. So I just saw this option today when I checked out the GitHub. I was wondering whether there would be interest in our enabling it for Pack, or Terrence had mentioned, oh, maybe we should do it for community, for like something like community. I just wondering what people thought.
Yeah, this was talked at length during one of the core team meetings, because I think we were like given early access to it, and ultimately I think we were given access to putting it wherever we wanted to, but we couldn't decide exactly where. And a lot of the concerns were around monitoring, right? Like the idea of having yet another channel to monitor for conversations, making it more difficult. So I don't know that that was ever answered, but if there are any ideas on how to solve that, I think that'd be valuable. Like if it exists, will anybody use it versus, the opposite? Would it just become this like black hole where nobody looks at it?
So like on Vercel, Gatsby, there's quite a few, but it is okay. It definitely could be another. If it's not more actively monitored by other people in the community, it could end up being more on our plate. So it wouldn't necessarily be as much fun as we thought it would.
Yeah, I think that was overall the only concern that I could remember. I know that there was a thought that potentially that could be a way to discuss RFCs, and there was a project. I don't remember exactly what project was trying to use discussions for RFCs, and it just didn't. Like the experience wasn't all too well. So we moved away from that one. But yeah, so like so far the only concern that I'm aware of is, will it be monitored, or would it just distribute information in a way that it's no longer, searchable, and so therefore detrimental towards what we're trying to achieve, which is provide, that support.
I wonder if some of the we have some Medium articles that like outline usage of this tool, or like kind of like examples of workflows. That's kind of like a higher level, like how does this fit into other things? That might be a useful place to have some of this. But
I'm not sure I gather what you were saying.
Meaning the comments on Medium articles.
Yeah, so like we have these like articles on Medium, right? Which I guess is a platform that's like, oh, anyone who uses this can kind of find an article. But we I guess do we have that stuff in the docs as well?
The
It's
blog posts?
yeah.
We don't. I guess the way that we've seen blog posts so far has been like very specific to a use case, whereas the docs are more like tutorials, right? Where the blog posts are just more or less announcements in a way.
Yeah, so having stuff that's more like tying pieces together, how to put pack in like a CI system, that feels like stuff that would be useful to have close to the repo rather than maybe disjointed off in this like blog sphere.
I see what you're saying. It's a very interesting thought, but is that a discussion at that point though? Like that's the part, like, or is that a wiki article, right? Because we also have had wiki forever, and nobody, like, I haven't seen a project that really uses it well.
Yeah.
Seen a lot that try and then they forget.
Yeah.
That they have it. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, yeah, it might be worth reaching out because I do feel like we said we were going to try it in the community repo, but I guess maybe it just dropped off and nobody actually set it up. But again, I'm still cautious as to like, what does this even mean, right? Like forums are great, but I don't know exactly how they tie into this ecosystem.
The community, I don't know if I would see the value in so much, because then I guess like that would be more general discussions on the cloud native Buildpacks project, which I don't think would get like once people are having those discussions, often they'd want to be much more kind of integrated with our normal channel, which is Slack, versus like if it's on Pack, then it would more be like an FAQ, like, hey, I'm trying to use this. Guess it'd be different than filing an issue, but they could just file an issue. So sorry, there's
Right.
not really much of a difference.
Yeah, I think the way that we saw this was it's really hard for a user to know what repo they should be having discussions in, right? Like, and you see this in Slack too, right? It's like, oh, they asked this question in the platform channel, right? But it was actually like a lifecycle implementation question, right? And so it seems like we don't expect them, and I think it'd be like poor for us to expect them to know exactly where to place all their questions and stuff. I think the idea is like you have one bucket, right? Like one place where you could ask any question you want, and then everybody that is a maintainer or a heavy contributor could go in there and answer those sort of questions, and then it doesn't really matter, right? You don't, like, I think you don't want to associate it with a particular repo unless you're talking about a very different kind of problem that you're trying to solve, where you're trying to talk about architecture and you want to have a very specific place to have just talk about the architecture within Pack, right? Or the architecture within Lifecycle. And so it's more geared towards the developers of that specific repo, right? To then use the discussions in that way. But that's very different than a end user discussion forum where they just come in and ask questions. So that's what I took away from all those conversations we had. And it resonates pretty well with me, and I could definitely see the hesitation for not trying to like spread too much.
Hear that?
So I guess what I would say is it's nice that we have a tool, but again, just like we have Wiki, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to use it, right? We need to make sure that we know why we're using it and what problems we're trying to solve before just taking it on.
Here.
Cool. All right, so we're 5 minutes over. Any last minute statements? Cool. All right. Well, I'll see you all online then.
See ya.